Hello there.
You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Outer Rim Cantina. I'm your host Alan.
And I'm your co-host Ashley.
And this is your weekly fix of all things Star Wars. Alright, so for today's episode of the podcast, we are going to be celebrating Attack of the Clones year. And even more than that though, even though it is the 20th anniversary of Attack of the Clones, we are also recording this episode on 2/22/2022, so we thought it fitting to watch episode 2, which also happens to be 2 hours, 22 minutes, and 22 seconds long. So there's definitely some kind of conspiracy going on there. George Lucas could just see it in his mind when they were making Attack of the Clones. He was like, yes, in 20 years, this time code is gonna pay off, just trust me, guys.
You know, I bet he's watching it right now and being like, yeah, I told you. Everyone who called me stupid, how are you feeling right now?
Yeah, exactly. He's just reveling in his success because he knew he was right the entire time, as he is with a lot of different things. But today, we are basically just going to be celebrating how good Attack of the Clones actually is. Because yes, Attack of the Clones is good, actually.
It definitely got a lot of flack. I wasn't even in any kind of fandom connected to Star Wars. I wasn't even born when this movie came out. And yet, I know that the immense hatred for Attack of the Clones happened then, and it has persisted since. And personally, having watched this movie a good few times in different stages of my life and love of Star Wars, I think it's really unfair.
Yeah, you know, I really don't get why this is the movie that, well, actually, no, I shouldn't say I don't get it, because I did get it at one point. At one point in my life, I will admit, I hated Attack of the Clones. If I was going to be one of those people who chooses to spend their life being angry online, I would be angry about Attack of the Clones. I used to despise this movie, but that changed when I was doing a Star Wars marathon rewatch with one of my friends back in the before long time ago year of 2019, when we were doing our marathon to prep for The Rise of Skywalker. We watched Attack of the Clones, and I realized that it is actually a very good movie. I really enjoyed watching Attack of the Clones again, and that was when my whole kind of outlook on not just Attack of the Clones itself, but also like Star Wars kind of shifted a little bit to where now, right, I'm not the person that's angry online because I have better things to do with my time. It's still kind of shocking to me today that Attack of the Clones gets ripped into more than The Phantom Menace. Like, sure, people still don't like The Phantom Menace today, even though The Phantom Menace is good, actually, as well, but it's mostly just because of, like, Jar Jar. Like, that's really the only complaint I ever see people really have about that movie. That and just the plot is boring, but they don't ever, like, go into details about any of it. But people really do not like Attack of the Clones. They just rip this movie to shreds.
Do you remember why you disliked it in the first place?
So I disliked it because of, number one, because of the absolute horrendous dialogue that Anakin and Padme had in this movie. And it is so bad. It is so atrocious. Listening to it causes me physical pain, but whereas before I just generally didn't like it, now I'm kind of like, well, that was the point. That was literally the whole point of it, was Anakin was supposed to have all of these cringe kind of romance lines, because he was a teenager, right? He was trying to act grown up, but he didn't have the experiences that go along with growing up like, you know, a normal person would. So he's trying to act his age or older than his age, but it just kind of ends up making him sound like an angsty 12-year-old, and I can see why so many people dislike that, but now I'm like, well, yeah, there was a reason for it. It kind of makes sense.
See, I went into this knowing that Hayden Christensen played exactly the role that was meant for him, and I know he got a ton of hate for it. But I went into it knowing, like, yes, he is playing a slightly cringy, absolutely unhinged, powerful teenager with this burden on his shoulders that he's known about since he was just a little kid. I mean, Hayden Christensen played that character. You know, he was given a script, he was told to act with it, and he definitely acted like with it. Like, there were parts of the movie where I was like, wow, I'm actually genuinely terrified of Anakin right now. Like, yes, it's cringy, and yes, he's kind of a little insane, but as you said, that was the point.
Yeah, and I think Hayden Christensen as an actor kind of encapsulated that perfectly, which brings me to I don't understand why so many people gave him so much crap for his portrayal of Anakin in Attack of the Clones. Like, he took what he was given and he ran with it, and he did it so well. And while George Lucas might have some problems writing dialogue, that's just a fact. Everybody is aware of that. But Hayden Christensen just did it in such a way where you could actually you could look past the cringe of what he was saying and feel kind of the emotion and the angst behind it, which was the whole point.
Yeah, and the movie itself, dialogue aside, was just absolutely elevated by the general cinematography of it. I mean, even like the really, really bad I hate sand scene was just beautifully shot, beautifully composed. The colors told stories. I mean, it's an aesthetically stunning movie, and nobody can deny that.
Oh yeah, it is definitely one of the most beautiful Star Wars films. And but even that is like another area where people gave it so much crap because back then, right, it was a movie that was made mostly using CGI, which was unheard of essentially at that time because right they used even more CGI than they did for the Phantom Menace, and it was just for that reason that like people were so against like not having actual sets and everything being computer generated and feeling that was like I don't know like easier than building actual sets or something, which is not the case. I don't know, people just ripped on the movie for it being mostly CGI, but at the end of the day, it ended up being gorgeous, and I'm glad they used so much CGI because without it, I don't think they could have used the colors and the kind of imagery that they used throughout the movie the way that they did. Because Attack of the Clones is one of the most colorful Star Wars movies that exists, which is kind of bizarre considering it is the darker middle chapter of this trilogy. But everything isn't just like red all the time like it is in Revenge of the Sith. It's kind of like a mix of orangish, reddish, and the colors kind of shift all throughout the movie.
You know, I would dare to say that while Revenge of the Sith is very heavily sunset based, especially in the Anakin Padme scenes, like the sun is definitely setting on their relationship, both literally and figuratively. Attack of the Clones is very much a dawn-centric color palette. It's like the sun is rising on all of this. I mean, even the Battle of Geonosis is so colorful with the way the Jedi's lightsabers are against the bleak sands. I mean, it's a beautiful movie. The Naboo scenes, you know, there's blues, there's pinks, there's light oranges, not kind of the darker reddish tones that we get towards the end of the movie in Revenge of the Sith.
And you can't talk about color without talking about Padme's wardrobe, because they literally spent all of their money for the entire movie just on her wardrobe. She has a different outfit in like every single scene. This lady is always changing clothes, and she always has the most outrageous outfits imaginable that usually are pretty colorful.
I mean, I could go into analyzing each and every one for hours, and I'm sure much more educated people than me have done that. But does she repeat an outfit at all?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, it's just her wardrobe I would say this is her best wardrobe. I mean, she has some looks in Revenge of the Sith, But I would dare to say that Attack of the Clones is Padme's best wardrobe movie. Just because of the variety, the different fabrics and textures used. I'm personally a fan of that. I think it's kind of nicknamed as the lake dress, the one that's very actually Dawn. Like the orange pink flowing, kind of off the shoulder sleeves. It's when they first arrive on Naboo. That's definitely my favorite.
Well, of course, yeah, and I think this movie kind of does a better job of Padme's wardrobe than like the Clone Wars does, because like they do kind of go all out with their outfits in the Clone Wars, but they run into kind of having to rely pretty heavily on colors and patterns, like vivid colors and patterns, I should say, just because of the stylized nature of an animated show versus they can actually show like different fabrics and that kind of stuff in a live action capacity.
Yeah, her wardrobe definitely suffers just from the style of the Clone Wars show, but they still do convey that like she still wears those outfits that are, I mean, outrageous to us, but they're actually pretty normal within the universe.
The Senate is temporary, drip is forever. Moving on to the a little bit more about the actual movie, the action scenes in this are very overlooked. Like whenever there's a conversation online about like your favorite scene in Star Wars or your favorite lightsaber battle or just battle scene in general, very rarely do you see something from Attack of the Clones besides maybe the Geonosis battle arena. But the action scenes in this movie, they're so good and they're so ridiculous and over the top, and I love them. Like just the speeder chase with Obi-Wan and Anakin trying to catch Zam Wesell. It's so weird. It has no right to be so weird, but they did it for us.
But like it's weird in a good way, it's fun. We have Obi-Wan and Anakin just absolutely bickering the entire time. Anakin loses lightsaber at least twice. And it's first of all really cool just seeing the way we get to see a ton of Coruscant. I'm sure there's millions of Easter eggs in all the advertisements around Coruscant. And I just love getting to see the planet that didn't really play a huge role in The Phantom Menace. And it played a huge role in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith and in the Clone Wars TV show. But this was really our first glimpse of Coruscant, and they went all out with those buildings.
It looked so cool. And yeah, it was such a stark kind of difference to only see Coruscant in like one, maybe two scenes in The Phantom Menace, and then like half the movie, or over half of Attack of the Clones takes place on Coruscant, and they actually show us, more stuff just beyond the skylines and like the Jedi Temple and the Senate building and that kind of stuff. They go through the streets and the alleys. They show us like the shops, the cantinas, the restaurants, all of that kind of stuff. So we get to really have a feel for, I guess, how expansive Coruscant itself really is, which was really cool. And again, something they could not have done as well if they did not use so much CGI. So yes, I will die on this hill of defending Attack of the Clones using CGI.
And I mean, not only does the CGI hold up, they did use it in combination with practical effects. Like, think about the Cantina scene where Obi-Wan and Anakin ambush Zam Wesell. I'm not sure how much of that is prosthetic and how much of that is CGI, the aliens in there.
I think for that scene, most of the aliens are actually practical costumes with some like added CG effects. But I know for a lot of the other like background aliens throughout the movie, like the aliens that we see kind of outside and inside of Dex's diner, and also the aliens that Anakin and Obi-Wan pass by during the speeder chase, those are all CG characters.
Yeah, and like the small moments with the aliens on Coruscant just really get me. I mean, you and I are the same. We like the kind of boring, down-to-earth stuff. I was doing my reading about the guy that Obi-Wan tells to go home and rethink his life. He does have a name, and it's Elon Sleazebagano, which is real creative and just a very Star Wars name. It is confirmed that he did go home and rethink his life, fell back into the criminal underworld a bit, and actually helped out Boba Fett on a mission during the Clone Wars. But then he actually did really rethink his life and was seen in, I believe it was a comic, handing out pamphlets to help other Coruscanti people with drug addiction. So good for you, Elon. Proud of you.
We love to see character development. It is a wonderful thing. And speaking of character development, an interesting little bit of trivia that I pulled from this really expansive thread that Pablo Hidalgo has been doing over on Twitter over the last couple of months, which is also where a lot of the little fun fact type stuff that we're going to talk about throughout this episode comes from. But one thing he pointed out was that Zam Wesell being a changeling wasn't actually in the original script of Attack of the Clones. That was something they decided to add during post-production, and I don't know, it's one of the, like, most, sometimes when you hear that, like, things are added in post-production, it kind of doesn't really mesh well with the rest of the movie or the scene that something was added into, but with Zam Wesell being a changeling, it works. It fits so well with the little cantina mini hunt thing that they do, where the Jedi are looking for Zam, but of course she's a changeling, so she could literally be anybody in the cantina, and it just gives a little bit of added mystery and suspense to the whole thing. And also, speaking of the cantina scene, another fun little cameo they had in the background was Ahmed Best and Katie Lucas. They kind of look at Obi-Wan. Yeah, I guess it's just Obi-Wan as he's walking to the bar for a drink, because Obi-Wan is an alcoholic, as we all know.
And honestly, I can't really blame him, having raised Anakin for the last 10 years.
Especially not after the absolute madness he just endured with the whole speeder chase literally like 5 minutes before that. So, yeah, if I was Obi-Wan, I'd probably want to drink too. Although, if I was Obi-Wan, I probably would have taken the offer for a death stick, just gonna be honest.
I mean, I think the council would kind of look down on that. And let me just say that I liked seeing more of the council in this movie, because I wasn't a huge fan of them in The Phantom Menace, not gonna lie.
Well, I mean, they're just rude all the time anyways, but yes, seeing the Jedi Council was very fun, as always. Another interesting little tidbit, though, about this, which I actually didn't find out until I read this Pablo thread, was that apparently they didn't actually, like, rebuild the whole council chamber set, or even really, like, film specific shots for a council meeting. They reused some of the background plates that they used for the Jedi Council stuff in The Phantom Menace, and then they just kind of CG'd in the new elements and the scenes that they did film for Obi-Wan and Yoda's conversation during the council meeting. So that's pretty cool that they could do that, and also it allowed them to have all of the council members present, because a lot of them were actually from the UK. So when they were filming Attack of the Clones, a lot of the original actors, or at least when they were filming this scene, they weren't available to shoot new stuff. So it's very interesting to see how they kind of reuse stuff, which is something that happens quite often in Star Wars. Nothing ever gets thrown away. Every idea is recycled eventually in some capacity, like the Scorpionic droids that were originally supposed to show up in this movie during the Battle of Geonosis. That idea was never used, but they showed up in the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, and the Pablo thread, props to you, Pablo, also talked about old models from Episode 1 being reused as well, correct?
Yeah, so a lot of the CG aliens we were talking about earlier, they're actually just redressed models of the pod racers from Episode 1, just given different clothes. Like, at one point, Sebulba shows up, but during the speeder chase, but he's redressed, and apparently the character's name is Sadaka. It's interesting how they like to reuse assets like that.
I mean, nothing in Star Wars ever dies. We know that.
Nope, literally not a single thing. Not a single character, not a single idea, nothing. Everything is recycled at all times.
Which is why I'm still convinced we are going to see Mr. Dexter Jetster again, somehow, because I need this.
Please. I think everybody needs this, because Dex is objectively the best character in this entire movie. And when we were doing our rewatch for this episode, I never really noticed this before, or never really paid attention to this before, but Dex has a lot of tattoos, like all over his arm, and he even has like faded knuckle tattoos that you can kind of see when he's hugging Obi-Wan. And I just, I need to know. I need to know what this man has been up to. What, what crazy, crazy stuff did this guy get up to before he opened up this random diner on Coruscant? These are important questions that I am disappointed Lucasfilm has not answered yet.
I mean, Obi-Wan obviously knows that Dex has seen stuff because he went to him first to identify that Camino saber dart. He knows.
Yeah, that is true. And Dex says that he was a prospector on. Does he give a planet name, or did he just say like in the Outer Rim?
He does. I
Anyways,
believe. I don't remember what it is.
yeah, he was a prospector on some planet in the Outer Rim, so obviously he's seen a lot of stuff while he was doing that, but, like, this man has such an expansive history, and it's literally just a completely blank slate. I need Dexter Jester, a Star Wars story. I've been waiting 20 years, I will wait 20 more. Lucasfilm, please. I need this in my life. I need it to feel whole again.
Yeah, I love that scene of him and Obi-Wan. Again, this is also from Mr. Pablo's thread about the original name of the Camino saber dart.
Yeah, it was originally supposed to be called the Camino Kyber Dart, apparently in the original drafts for the movie, which, again, apparently the word Kyber was something that George Lucas had wanted to put in Star Wars ever since he was writing the scripts for the very first movie, but it just never happened. So it's interesting to see that we were close to getting Kyber in Star Wars with a Camino Kyber Dart, but given what we know about Kyber in the context of Star Wars these days, I am very glad that they ended up changing the name to Saber Dart. I also think Saber Dart sounds cooler anyways.
I don't know, I didn't expect that because I could swear that they mentioned kyber crystals in the original trilogy.
There was originally going to be a scene where I think Luke finds a Kyber stone or Kyber rock or something. I don't think they called it a Kyber crystal, but it was a Kyber something or other that was that had something to do with the Force. Like it had the Force flowing through it or something like that. I'm not entirely sure why that idea was scrapped from the final draft of the movie, but the next time Kyber is ever mentioned in Star Wars is when, as in the Gathering arc of the Clone Wars, when we get to see the younglings go to Ilum and get their Kyber crystals to power their lightsabers, and then that's when all of the lore around the Kyber crystals took off. Because before, the crystals that powered Jedi lightsabers were just called Adegan crystals, and they just grew on Ilum, and that was that. There wasn't really any history or real significance there. Also, because in Legends, you could power a lightsaber with, like, pretty much any kind of crystal thing you wanted to.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I guess I was surprised because I'm looking at this with all of the hindsight we have now, and I'm like, well, the Death Star used kyber crystals, right? So why didn't you just do it then? I'm like, wait, did George Lucas even know how the Death Star was powered when he wrote this? Like, I just forget that he did not have the hindsight that we do about all of this.
Yeah, he was creating all this stuff after the fact, which is why it's even more interesting that the he wasn't able to put the word Kyber into Star Wars until the Gathering arc of the Clone Wars, which I think was season 4. So that would have been like 2012 or something. So it was a very long time. This man has been waiting so long just to get this one little word into Star Wars. I'm so sorry, George, that people tell you no.
I mean, people should definitely tell him no, but maybe they shouldn't have told him no about this one specific thing.
Impossible. George Lucas is always right. But going deeper into kind of a little bit of Jedi lore, I guess, it was interesting to learn that apparently the Jedi Archive scene where Obi-Wan goes to find out about the planet Camino after talking to Dex, the whole archive set was actually a miniature set, and all of the busts of the Jedi that you see at the kind of ends of all of these rows are actually the ILM supervisors, minus the bust of Dooku that Obi-Wan is looking at while he's waiting to use the computer and talk to Madame Jocasta about losing a planet.
And honestly, like, I don't think Obi-Wan really deserved the roasting he got about losing a planet. It's not his fault it was apparently erased from the archives.
Madame Jocasta was like, if it's not in the records, it simply does not exist. Get out! And then he goes to Yoda for some help because he didn't like being so offended by Madame Jocasta. And then Yoda was like, lost a planet Master Obi-Wan has. Loser.
Really teaching the younglings the important lessons, which is sass, Master Kenobi.
And then, of course, Obi-Wan has to get the answer from a bunch of little tiny baby Jedi.
Little tiny baby Jedi that absolutely 100% survive till after the end of Revenge of the Sith. Definitely.
Yes, all of them. Every single one, without a doubt.
Okay, but they're adorable. They're so cute. Especially, I love that the little Togruta, even though she isn't named, is named Ashla, which is a name that, as we both know, is pretty prominent in Star Wars. I believe in the Ahsoka novel, she used it as her code name. I'm fairly sure about that.
I think so.
And it's also the name for the light side of the Force.
And also the 3 alien younglings that are present in that scene, all of them were actually just regular kids, but they didn't bother making little tiny baby alien heads and stuff, so they just CG'd on some alien heads and hands. And also apparently the helmets that they were wearing, those were all CG as well.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
See, that I don't really get the point of.
Neither do I, but yeah, so I can kind of see, again, where people might complain a little bit about George going just a little teeny tiny bit overboard with the CGI, but at the end of the day, it worked.
And I mean, it looks good. I would never have guessed that the helmets were CGI. I mean, it holds up enough. So, Obi-Wan loses a planet, gets roasted for it, has the little baby Jedis find it. We go to Naboo, and I love Naboo. Naboo's a beautiful planet, and it's not its fault that it does have the objectively cringiest scene in this movie.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. But not like here. Here everything is soft and smooth.
Honestly, if a guy proposed to me with that, I would say yes.
I mean, Anakin was just in shock for the entire rest of that movie that line even actually worked.
I mean, I think he really expected her to run away screaming, so maybe that could explain a few more of his actions later in the movie. He's just shocked that he said that. And not only did it work, it got him a wife.
Absolutely amazing. God, I wish I could do that.
But definitely, the body language in that scene was a little iffy. The way it was delivered, it is definitely not the strongest scene in the movie.
I think we can all collectively agree, if there's anything the Star Wars fandom can collectively agree on, it is that this scene is really kind of rapey. It just is. It's creepy, and it's weird, and the sand line is so bad. But apparently, ILM and Lucasfilm, they knew that the scene was creepy when they filmed it. And so ILM decided they were going to have to make it just slightly less creepy. So they gave Anakin a digital hand to touch Padme's, because apparently the original version of this scene was shot with him, like, grabbing her waist as he was, like, talking about sand. And yeah, I can see how that is just real creepy. It does not need to be that creepy.
See, if they had done it that way, I feel like this movie would not be as popular in modern circles as it is compared to the ideals of back then to the ideals of now. The scene is tolerable now, and honestly, the amount of foreshadowing that they have in their following Naboo escapade kind of makes up for it. I mean, you really, I think this is really the first moment where you see Darth Vader in Anakin. When he's talking to Padme about ruling the galaxy and somebody telling everyone else what to do. And she's like, oh, well, is that going to be you? And Anakin's like, no. And then the narrator goes, actually, yes.
He's gonna call up his homeboy Palpatine.
Yeah. So I just think that, first of all, everybody complaining that Darth Vader was not a whiny teenager. Yes, he was. Whiny teenagers grow up to be like Darth Vader. And I think that was delivered beautifully, just in the way they really got into Anakin's ideals, what Anakin thinks is right, wrong, his morals, his ethics. And they did it innocently, so that if people were watching this in true chronological order, which I do know I've heard of kids who were born after the prequels, their parents show them it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 order. I feel like it really is just your first glimpse of what happens, but it's framed innocently enough that you'd never guess who Darth Vader actually was until the end of Revenge of the Sith. And of course you get to see him. And so I just think that would be really interesting to watch it knowing nothing about it, just because of those Naboo conversations. It's just such an interesting little bit of foreshadowing.
Very true. I wish more people could look past the absolute cringe that was the previous scene before they Anakin and Padme are just vibing on Naboo, and he goes just a little bit fascist, because there is actually some really good material in those following scenes, but people always want to focus on just him saying how much he doesn't like sand, and then all of a sudden Padme wants to bang him.
I mean, it's really just underappreciated, all of the Naboo stuff, including Anakin's nightmare about his mother. I mean, that is just such a important moment in his character development. And like, yes, it's sandwiched between cringe, but you really feel Anakin's fear like through the screen. I mean, Hayden Christensen, beautiful acting.
Yeah, what I thought was most interesting about that scene is apparently the Shmi voiceover during Anakin's nightmare wasn't actually a thing until the 2011 Blu-ray release of this movie. And thinking back on it, I can't remember if I've seen the version that doesn't have the voiceover, because I know I swear I've watched the prequels before 2011, but I just can't remember ever watching that movie without that voiceover in it. And I probably did see a version of it on like cable TV back when they used to rerun the Star Wars movies on like Spike, way back when, before like 2010. Yeah, I just can't remember ever watching that scene and there not being the Shmi voiceover, but apparently it's a thing.
I mean, it makes
and
too
I'm
much
just dumb.
sense to have there. I mean, I can't imagine the scene without it. I mean, I know he mentions that like he's scared for his mother, but that's definitely a detail that I agree even added apparently way post-production, that works much better.
So Pablo didn't give a specific date for when the voiceover was recorded, but he did say that it was like several years after the movie released, and either like slightly before the regular DVD release or something, or after one of the DVD releases. But it was like after episode 3 was already out, was when they decided to go in and record this line. But then they didn't actually put it in a copy of the movie until they made the Blu-ray version in 2011. So they waited so long. They waited nearly 10 years to add this one thing to this one scene that is actually kind of important and probably should have been there to begin with.
I mean, it was probably one of those things that just kept George Lucas up at night. He'd be laying at 2 a.m. thinking, wow, I should have had a Shmi line in Anakin's nightmare in Attack of the Clones. Why didn't I do that? And it just tormented him for years, a decade, until he could finally put it in.
George Lucas was literally Anakin rolling around in bed in the middle of the night, agonizing over not putting the Shmi line in in this movie. He could finally rest easy once that was complete. But keeping up with the Naboo stuff, Padme's servant Tekla, a character that is occasionally talked about, but she's mostly just a background character in this movie. Her like whole backstory was pretty much written up by fans via the old Hyperspace Fan Club that was a website in a long, long time ago. I'm pretty sure it's shut down now, unfortunately. But way back then in the early 2000s, apparently Lucasfilm would put up these character names and like a picture of the character and let fans come up with backstories and just content and history for these random background characters. And so the fans wrote up some history for Tekla. They gave her a surname, which I can't remember right offhand, but later on in the Clone Wars, her full name and her fan-generated backstory were actually referenced in an episode of the Clone Wars, making that largely fan-generated character a part of the George Lucas canon storytelling, which is awesome, and I wish they would do more of that today.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I read about that because fandom has just changed so much from where it started with Star Trek in, I believe, the 1960s was when you really began to see fandom as we know it. And you just don't get that kind of interaction nowadays. Like, sure, the creators of stuff may like your tweets and stuff, but there's no serious, like, collaborative effort all based on one website that the creators could actually see and draw ideas from. So I just think that's a really, really cool detail, and I wish fandom was still like that today.
Bring back the Hyperspace Fan Club. I will absolutely die on this hill too.
Yeah, and just another thing that George Lucas apparently really wanted to bring in for a long time, like what, 20, 30 years, was is it Iowa? Awa? Is it ever said out
Uh,
loud?
no, I don't think so. Maybe in the Clone Wars or something, but I'm going to go with Iowa. That yeah, that's what we're going with for the purposes of this episode. But yeah, George has apparently been trying to get these stupid space whales into Star Wars since The Empire Strikes Back, where originally in one of the early drafts of that movie they were going to be flying over Bespin, and that didn't work out. So then he threw them in a draft of Return of the Jedi, where apparently they were going to be flying over a grassland planet called Sycamon. That didn't work out, so then apparently he put them in the Phantom Menace for the Gungans to fly them around, and that didn't work out. So, once again, he can finally rest easy, knowing that he got his flying space whale things into Star Wars. He eventually would get Kyber into Star Wars, and he just has a lot of peace from this one moment. It's very, very important. This single shot of the thing erupting from the water and flying towards Taipoka City is actually objectively one of the most important shots in the entire movie, and you cannot change my mind.
I am in absolute agreement. They are A, one of the best animals in Star Wars, and B, they're obviously fundamental members of the prequel trilogy.
Yes, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt.
But Kamino itself is actually genuinely fundamental and has, in my opinion, I think the most criminally underrated action/fight scene.
The Obi-Wan Django fight is slept on way too much. It is unacceptable. It brings me back to what we were talking about earlier, when you see, like, people asking, oh, what's your favorite battle scene in Star Wars? Very rarely do you see the Django versus Obi-Wan fight, even though it is so good. Not only is it just good in terms of, right, it puts a stupid, goofy smile on my face every time I watch it, it was also, at the time, one of the most ambitious things ever done in a movie, because most of the fight was created with digital doubles of Jango Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi. So there were only a few shots throughout that entire fight where Tamora Morrison and Ewan McGregor were actually acting out anything. And one of the scenes that you would think would be an actual, the actual actors themselves doing it, and not just CG doubles, is when Obi-Wan gets pulled off the ledge by Django's cord, and Django catches himself on the side of the landing platform and releases the rope, and causing Obi-Wan to fall. That whole thing was done digitally. There was not a single frame of that where either Ewan McGregor or Django Fett were actually there. And I think that's incredible.
I never would have guessed that, especially not that scene. It looks incredible.
Yeah, they didn't want to do it at first, right? Because they thought it was going to look terrible just because of how much movement was involved in it, compared to just, a couple of shots of Django flying around on a jetpack shooting lasers or Obi-Wan jumping in the air and kicking Django. But they did it, and it actually worked out, and looks really good. And the fight itself still looks really good today, and I don't know why people sleep on it so much.
And it's so good because it really shows the only prior people that we've really seen be a threat to the Jedi were other lightsaber wielders, like Darth Vader in the original trilogy and Darth Maul in The Phantom Menace. Like, stormtroopers can't touch a Jedi. They just weren't a threat. But now we're seeing some random armored Mandalorian warrior actually put up a really good fight against Obi-Wan, and he's so creative about it too. I just think it was an incredible introduction to an enemy that does not have a lightsaber and yet could absolutely hold their own against a Jedi.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a reason he was the best bounty hunter in the galaxy. Interesting. And also, continuing talking about Mandalorians for a little bit, this is something I didn't realize until my most recent rewatch of the film, but it's actually the first time that we see the Mandalorian language in print form on the display consoles of the Slave One during the starfighter battle above Geonosis. But it's also the first and only time, I think, that we hear the Mandalorian language actually spoken in a film, which is when Django tells Boba to close the closet door so Obi-Wan doesn't find the armor that would incriminate him in trying to kill the senator.
And that was just really cool. I was shocked when I heard it because I didn't really register it as Mandalorian the first time I watched this movie in living memory, I should say. So when I rewatched it recently, I was like, is that Mondoa? And I loved it. I thought it was so cool. And the fact that they had the Mandalorian characters too, which means they already had the alphabet drawn up, perfect. But then, we go from the Django Obi-Wan fight on Kamino when it's pouring rain to Tatooine. And of course, we've never seen Tatooine in Star Wars before. It's never shown up.
No, never. Nothing ever happens on Tatooine. It is a useless, boring backwater where nobody lives on Tatooine. Nothing ever happens. Nothing goes on. It's totally unimportant. It's just a random, stupid rock floating in space.
Yeah, and definitely a huge part of Anakin's character development in Attack of the Clones does not happen here. He and Padme just go to Tatooine, and it's a total happily ever after from there, right?
Yes, definitely. That's how it works.
But in all seriousness, the Tatooine part of Attack of the Clones is objectively a masterpiece. I mean, first of all, we get young Owen and Beru, which, yes, my love's best characters.
We stan.
And then we kind of get to see what Shmi was up to, because I'm sure everyone after The Phantom Menace was like, oh no, Anakin left his mom, but I'm sure the Jedi or someone is going to free her so she can at least live happily knowing that her son went to the Jedi and is being kept safe by them. I'm sure that's what everybody was thinking.
Without a doubt.
But then we kind of get more of what she was up to fleshed out. Like, she got married and freed. Good for her. Proud of her. And then we find out she's missing, and maybe Anakin's nightmares weren't just an excuse to have shirtless Hayden Christensen.
Do we need an excuse for shirtless Hayden Christensen, though?
No, we do not.
I mean, if it were up to me, he just wouldn't have a shirt throughout the entire movie.
What, he's going to pull a Kit Fisto?
Yes.
It is really interesting watching the Tatooine, especially with the hindsight of Book of Boba Fett. And that's why I really enjoyed watching this with all of the episodes of Book of Boba Fett out, but more importantly, episodes 1 and 2. Because in this movie, we learn that the Tuskens took Shmi for no reason. I believe they're referred to as a pack and not a tribe, definitely making them seem more animalistic than what we know of the Tuskens 30, 40 years in the future. And then we see what they did to Shmi, And it's hard to connect the beautiful kind of culture that we got in Book of Boba Fett to the prior, really just pure evil Tuskens that were portrayed in Attack of the Clones. Was it still an excuse for them to get Skywalkered? Not. I mean, I don't know, you could debate whether Anakin was in the right all day and all night. But the fact of the matter is, he is a Jedi. He should not have massacred a bunch of people. I mean, without at least doing, like, investigation first. I mean, maybe they had a reason. We don't know. They got Skywalkered. They can't speak for themselves.
I mean, you could make the argument that since the Tuskens had been continually terrorizing the moisture farmers outside of Mos Eisley, that Anakin may or may not had done the people a favor, but should he have killed literally all of them? No, that's a bit extreme. That just a little bit extreme. But yeah, that is a stark contrast between the Tuskens that we see in this movie and the Tuskens that we see in the Book of Boba Fett. But something the Book of Boba Fett also mentions is that, right, there are multiple different tribes of Tuskens, and it's not all of them might be as culturally enlightened, I guess, as the tribe that we saw in the Book of Boba Fett was. So I mean, like, if Boba Fett was found by the tribe of Tuskens that lived outside of Mos Eisley, assuming Anakin didn't kill them, right? Would they have taken Boba away from the Sarlacc and taught him their ways and all that stuff? No, they probably would have just killed him.
I don't think the argument is really more whether Anakin was actually justified about killing the Tuskens. I think it's more that as a Jedi, that should not have been the first thing he leapt to. And I think that's the real issue with it. If some random, non-Force sensitive person decided to go out and massacre the Tuskens, is it kind of bad? Yes, but how much damage can a person like that really do? Anakin, on the other hand, or any Jedi for that matter, can do a lot of damage, hence the training they are subjected to since practically birth. So I think that's the real issue with it, but the way, I mean, you could just feel the pain through the screen. It is also one of just my favorite angsty scenes in Star Wars. It's terrifying, it's horrifying, and us knowing what's going to happen just makes it so much worse. That this is just the start, this is not the end.
And then he returns from all of that and tells Padme everything he did, and then she's like, yes, this is the man that I want to bang, without a shadow of a doubt. He really blew me away with that sand line, but now that he's murdered women and children, oh, I'm all over that. That really got my motor going.
See, I see a lot of people argue, a concerning amount of people, that Padme had absolutely no part in Anakin's fall, that she was a completely innocent bystander manipulated by Anakin to look past all his crimes. Like, no, she knew what he did, and any sane person probably would have told somebody, at least Obi-Wan. Like, maybe she didn't want to get him in trouble with the council, but Padme knows Obi-Wan, and, like, he was definitely someone who should have known about this. So while Padme, obviously didn't deserve her fate, nobody deserves the fate that Padme got, she was complicit, and she was not an innocent bystander in the fall of Anakin Skywalker. And I just think that's something that's really overlooked. Like, it's not like Anakin kept this secret from her. This would be a vastly different story if he kept this secret from her. But she walked into this with eyes open.
It could also be argued that she's the entire reason that, like, he went to the dark side anyways, which, I mean, like, in the grand scheme of things, yeah, that pretty much is, but if you really get down into it, at the end of the day, she's the one who at first was like, no, Anakin, we shouldn't be doing this, right? It's bad, please stop. But then, before the Geonosis arena scene, then she's like, okay, well, yeah, okay, whatever, and then kind of gives into it. So if she didn't give into it and agree to go along with Anakin and his feelings, then things probably would have been a lot different as well. And I feel like if that was the case and she didn't kiss Anakin before they went out into the arena, she probably would have told Obi-Wan about at least some of what had happened over the course of him being her bodyguard. And they, I don't know, maybe would have worked out their issues like normal people. Crazy, right? That never happens in Star Wars.
Oh, yeah, nobody can be normal people. But Padme's character is a complex one, and I hate to see people diminish her to, oh, cute lady who was manipulated by a hot man to excuse war crimes. Like, she's a lot more complex than that, and she knew what she was doing, and she played a role in this. And I love Padme. This is not a let's bash Padme. It's just she's very complex, and she absolutely played a part in this. And of course, I love her because she's also a badass. I mean, look at her at Geonosis. Like, the second they get into that arena, she's on top of it, as Obi-Wan said.
I get it. I understood that reference.
Yes, he's terrible. But even during the droid factory scene, which R2 MVP of that scene.
Obviously, well, R2 is the MVP of all of Star Wars. Star Wars is just the adventures of R2-D2 and various other people.
I mean, you're not wrong.
But yes, if you think Padme is just some rando female character there for the sake of Anakin, nah, you should probably read the Queen Shadow series by is it Claudia Gray that
isn't
wrote
it
that?
EK
Or E.K. Johnston?
It's E.K. Johnston.
Yeah, I think it's E.K. Johnston.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, read that series. It's really good. But anyways, we move on from Tatooine and the various and sundry things that happened there to Yoda and Mace back on Coruscant, where Yoda is feeling the effects of Anakin slaughtering all of these Tuskens. And it's in this moment, which again is something I think is very overlooked in this movie, where Mace Windu literally openly states that the Jedi Order's ability to use the Force is diminished. We should probably tell somebody, and we should probably inform the Senate about this, because, it might turn into a problem. And I totally forgot this until this rewatch, but it's Yoda that's the one that says, no, we shouldn't tell the Senate, because if we tell the Senate, then we're only going to have more enemies. And I just think it's so interesting to see that Mace was the one that suggested they tell the Senate, because just based on his character and his personality alone, you would think Yoda would be the one to acknowledge the Jedi Order's weakness and want to tell the Senate about it, and it would be Mace that would object to that, but no, it's the other way around. It's so interesting, and it's so overlooked. There's like so much other stuff in this movie.
And I think there's a lot of arguments you can make about the scene itself. Like, you could argue that Yoda's arrogance blinded him. He thought, oh, the Jedi Order can handle this. Or you could say that Yoda was not a fan of how closely the Jedi Order was allied with the Senate. I mean, they are somewhat supposed to be independent, so involving the Senate in this would only make them more enemies, and it would put the Order at danger. So I just think it's a really interesting scene. I agree. I would absolutely switch those roles, just knowing what I know about each character.
Yeah, and then going from that to even more exposition stuff, we go to Obi-Wan being captured on Geonosis and interrogated by Dooku, but instead of interrogating Obi-Wan, Dooku explains literally the entire plot to Obi-Wan, point blank. He tells him everything that's going on, literally A to Z. Here's what's gonna happen, here's when it's gonna happen. Literally, I'm telling you everything right now. And personally, I do enjoy when characters show up and just explain the entire plot of Star Wars for the audience's convenience, especially in a film like this, where the plot itself it's absolutely bonkers, as we said at the beginning of this. And it's, by the time we got to this point in the movie, even I was like, okay, wait, why was Obi-Wan on Geonosis in the first place? Like, I just, could not remember the whole, reason for any of this. But it all apparently started with Palpatine wanting to kill Padme because Padme was going to stop his creation of the clone army. But Palpatine, of course, doesn't want to do it himself because he can't ruin his image as Chancellor Palpatine. So he gets his apprentice Dooku to do it. Well, of course, Dooku doesn't want to do it because he doesn't want to get the Jedi's attention, so then he hires Jango Fett to do it. Well, of course, Jango Fett doesn't want to do it because, I don't know, he has better things to do, so he gets Zam Wesell to do it. And Zam Wesell can't be bothered to do it either, so she gets a droid to do it. And the droid is, I guess, just a really lazy droid, because instead of just breaking down Padme's window in her apartment and just shooting her right then and there, the droid decides to use some worms to try and, like, poison the senator or something. Like, I don't know, I don't know why this whole thing was so complex, but that just leads to all of these various events that finally end up with Obi-Wan in a cage talking to Dooku, and Dooku telling him literally everything, and then Obi-Wan just being like, nah, bro, that ain't true. You're not right. Get out of here. I don't want to listen to you.
Which is, like, honestly, one of the funniest scenes in the movie, that we just get the whole plot given to us, and Obi-Wan's like, he's just some crazy old man. That's not true.
Okay, boomer.
Literally, he okay boomer Dooku.
Yep. At 100%. It's insane. And then going from that, though, we get the absolute work of art, that is the Geonosis droid factory scene, where, as we said earlier, R2 gets to save the day, as he always does, at every point throughout every movie, because R2-D2 is the main character.
And it's so good. I mean, I was mentioning to you that the sound of the droid factory, of them being put together, is so distinct. Like, if that was just played for me randomly with zero context, I would recognize it. And I just think that the way the factory looks, the way it's laid out, it's so cool. I mean, I'm guessing that's pretty much 100% CGI, just based on the looks.
Yeah, probably.
It's so good. And I even love the C-3PO moment. I'm a C-3PO stan. I know a lot of people don't like him, but I like him because I relate to him.
He's just trying his best.
He is trying his best. And I kind of liked the part where he got his head put on a B1 droid body, and then the B1 droid head got put on his body. I mean, maybe this is me just being super thematic and analytical and reading into things that George Lucas absolutely did not intend. But I could also argue, death of the author, this story says what I want it to say. I could definitely argue that it could be speaking that, like, the droids had no choice in fighting this war. Like, even if its head is on another body, or its body has a sentient head on it, every part of them is programmed to fight this war for the Separatists. And then you think about, oh, wait, well, the clones didn't really have a choice either. Every part of them was programmed to fight for the Republic. So it was really a war of two droid armies. One of them was just slightly less morally acceptable than the other one. And I just think that was really interesting, especially considering how we see the clones get personalities in the Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith, and how we also see that B1 droids kind of have personalities as well. Like, it's so interesting the way they're already setting up that theme of how terrible this war is. Like, nobody wins. Neither side wins, and neither side is better than the other side.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, but also, you're probably reading a little too much into the funny haha C-3PO battle droid joke.
I am, but...
just a little tiny bit.
Death of the author. This is my Attack of the Clones now. It doesn't belong to him anymore. You saw my name's on the credits, right? First one up. Okay?
You're right. My mistake.
But you know what?
How could I possibly forget this?
Excuse me for reading into it, because the whole Battle of Geonosis is a masterpiece. Especially the Anakin, Padme, and Obi-Wan fight. It's so good.
Yeah, it is. The entire arena scene, for as long as I can remember, pretty much, it has been my, well, actually, no, probably my favorite, big battle scene in all of Star Wars. And getting to see Padme, Anakin, and Obi-Wan all deal with their respective beasts that are trying to eat them in their own different ways. Incredible. Absolutely wonderful. I love it. Like we said earlier, Padme was on top of the whole thing, but getting to see how Obi-Wan and Anakin dealt with their problems was quite interesting as well. because they did something similar to what they did with the Yoda and Mace dialogue before, but we see Anakin actually calming down and taming his beast to ride it and use it to fight off the Geonosians and the battle droids and everything. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan is the one that actually actively tries to kill his beast. And normally, you would think those roles would be reversed. Anakin would be the one to kill his beast, and then Obi-Wan would be the one to ride his. But it goes back to, at least the way I see it, it goes back to Anakin finding at least a little bit of inner peace with himself right before the whole Geonosis scene happens, when he can finally express his feelings for Padme, and she finally accepts those, and so it gives him, it kind of calms down his internal strife that has been happening throughout the entire rest of the movie, to the point where he's focused and calm enough internally to be able to calm down this angry, ravenous beast that wants to kill him.
And I just think that's really good for Anakin, because I think that's really the only time we see Anakin when he's loving without that possession aspect that really screws the galaxy over in Revenge of the Sith. Because I think right now his love for her really is how a Jedi is supposed to love, and that's what makes him a better Jedi.
We get to see all the Jedi charging into the arena and fighting off all the battle droids, and that will never not be like the coolest thing I've ever seen.
It's so good. Like, we never really get to see that many Jedi fight at the same time. But of course, we also know that they didn't really win the Battle of Geonosis, not the Jedi anyways. The numbers I could find on casualties indicated that 1 to 2% of the entire Jedi Order died at the Battle of Geonosis, which, if you want to put that in real-world numbers, that would be like 78 million people on Earth dying at once, and that's at least. That's the lowball estimate.
Yeah, according to StarWars.com, at least there were about 10,000 Jedi at the start of the prequels, and even during Attack of the Clones, I think. And then 200 of them were sent to Geonosis, and 170 died. So there were only about 30 survivors of the entire battle.
And I think that is criminally overlooked, like how devastating that was for the Jedi. Like, a lot of people question why the Jedi even leapt into this war, but they obviously knew those battle droids were a serious threat, because it took out a huge chunk of their pretty small population for a galaxy that big. So the Battle of Geonosis is incredible and badass, but it's also a very, very dark moment in Jedi Order history.
But it's fine, because we finally get to see the clones show up and attack. I know, who would have seen that coming, right? But also, it's I think it's a crime that the space battle of Geonosis was cut from the movie, because I want to see an hour-long Battle of Geonosis. Apparently, there was originally going to be a ground and space/air battle that took place, which I guess was probably going to be part, at least somewhat, of when we see the gunships come down to the arena and take Anakin and Obi-Wan out, and then they're flying across Geonosis and attacking all of the Trade Federation ships and all that stuff. I guess the air part was probably going to be some of that, probably some space stuff too, but unfortunately, we didn't get to see it. It's a crime. I will be forever upset at this fact, because I love the Battle of Geonosis. It's so good. It's absolute perfection. And not only is it perfection, but they gave me the 2 best prequel ships in the entire trilogy. Well, 2 of the best prequel ships, excluding the N1 Starfighter, in a single shot, which is the LAAT and the Republic Attack Ship. And the Republic Attack Ship is overlooked so often. I don't know why everybody overlooks this ship. It looks so cool. I love the attack ship.
And of course you love the Battle of Geonosis because Republic Commando.
Well, yes, obviously. The Battle of Geonosis is both an absolute masterpiece, but then also has the Republic Commando references. When Mace Windu shows up and talks to Commander Pons, and Pons is like, I got special commando units waiting your orders. I'm like, yes, Delta Squad, the members of Omega Squad, please give them to me. My boys, I love you.
I'm considering that it was Delta Squad and the Omega Squad members' original teams. I think we agreed that there's nothing telling us that it's not canon, so it is canon.
I think the Republic Commando game, and then also at least the first tie-in novel, Hard Contact, I think both of those basically confirm that those were the commando units that they were talking about. Was because in the Repcom game you actually play as Delta Squad during the Battle of Geonosis, so yeah, they're obviously one of them that Pons is referring to. But then the other 4 squads are the other 4 squads that have the members that will eventually form Omega Squad after the Battle of Geonosis, because the rest of them die, unfortunately. And I'm still sad about that. I will never not be sad about that. I can't believe they massacred my boys.
But yeah, the whole Battle of Geonosis and the little battles happening within is just criminally underrated. Like, even, okay, it's no Mustafar battle, it's no the Phantom Menace, Darth Maul and Qui-Gon fight, but I feel like the Dooku duel is underappreciated.
The Dooku duel it's so good. I've said that so many times during this episode, but it's just so good. And rewatching it now with all the memories of the Clone Wars and everything else, it really shows like how much Anakin and Obi-Wan both grew from the start of the war to the end of it. Like, they get absolutely wrecked in this fight with Dooku now. But then the last time we see them fight Dooku in the Clone Wars, which I think is season 5 with the Pike arc, where they meet him for the final time before Revenge of the Sith, and just the difference between both of those fights and how Anakin and Obi-Wan like actually fight together in that one versus Anakin charging in and immediately getting his limbs cut off during this movie. It's very interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely the first limb loss in the prequels, and of course, Anakin's obviously not going to lose any more limbs. It was in no way foreshadowing anything that might happen to Anakin in the future.
You could argue it's technically the second, if you count the head as a limb.
I would say, in anatomical terms, no.
Fine then. Although it would have been the third limb if they kept the original Mace Windu Django Fett duel in there, in which Mace Windu chops off both of Django Fett's arms before he cuts off his head. I'm disappointed they cut that out of the movie, but it had to be rated PG, so I can see why they did that.
I mean, the scene is out there and it exists, so it's canon.
Exactly.
But the Dooku duel is
100% confirmed.
The Dooku duel is so good because you also got to remember that Yoda trained Dooku. He knows him, and I mean, is that actually mentioned in the movie?
I think maybe no. I don't think in Attack of the Clones. I think it's maybe mentioned in The Phantom Menace or Revenge of the Sith. I don't know. Anyways, it's obviously canon now. We know that Yoda trained Dooku, and then Dooku trained Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon trained Obi-Wan, and then Obi-Wan trained Anakin. But with the Dooku duel in Attack of the Clones, we actually get to see how powerful Yoda really is. Especially when, going all the way back to 2002. Up until that point, we had just heard that, yeah, Yoda is this super powerful Jedi Master that, we first meet in the original trilogy, and then we get to see for a little bit in The Phantom Menace, but he doesn't actually, do any fighting in The Phantom Menace. So then he shows up on Geonosis and just starts doing these crazy flips all over the place. Turns out he really doesn't actually need that cane. It's just for show, and holds his own against Dooku. So we get to see both how powerful Yoda is, but also how powerful Dooku is to be able to hold his own against the Grand Master of the Jedi Order. But then again, Dooku was the best duelist in the Jedi Order before he left, so it's very interesting to see that that matchup and see that basically the both of them were tied with each other, essentially. And I mean, at one point, Dooku even says, it's clear this contest won't be won by our knowledge of the Force, but by our skill with a lightsaber.
Yeah, and I can definitely imagine how much of a trip it was when your only content of Yoda was him being a little goblin on Dagobah and
Beating R2-D2 with a stick
and
in a swamp.
him talking in The Phantom Menace, to then go into Attack of the Clones being like, oh, hee, little goblin man, just gonna be old and wise. No. I can just imagine how great that was for people who did not, like, already kind of just have this knowledge like I did, this hindsight. I bet it was hilarious.
But then the whole movie wraps up with one of, I guess, the most iconic kind of Yoda lines, where he says, "Begun the Clone War has," and we get the final shot of Obi-Wan, Windu, and Yoda in the council chamber, and once again, absolutely beautiful use of color there to have all of the kind of burnt orangish of the... Is that supposed to be a sunset or a sunrise? I guess it's supposed to be a sunrise, cause, yeah.
I believe so.
Because the whole movie has been about, the rising dawn, essentially. So, yeah, we get to see this beautiful orange sunrise where Yoda's talking about how no one ever really wins a war and everything's about to get super dark. And then the next shot is of the clone army taking off in all their ships to go and start a war all over the galaxy, and everything is bathed in red, and we get to hear the Imperial March playing. And normally, that would be where you would think the movie would end, because it is the darker middle chapter. But no, of course, it does not, because Star Wars, at its core, has always been about hope, and I think the ending of Attack of the Clones does this perfectly, where the actual ending of the movie is on the wedding on Naboo. We get this absolutely beautiful, beautiful shot of Anakin and Padme together professing their love for one another. And that is where the movie finally fades out.
And I definitely think that all of Anakin and Padme's relationship has been about hope. Like, they're going into this, they talked about it, they know they have to keep it secret, they know it's going to be hard, but they love each other and they have hope that they will be able to make it work. And I just think that's why it's better that, yes, this movie is called Attack of the Clones, but at its core, Star Wars is a tragedy. But a tragedy is not made a tragedy if all of it is dark. A tragedy is a tragedy because hope still exists. And I just think Attack of the Clones encompasses that beautifully.
So all of that is to say that Attack of the Clones is good, actually. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Monday with more exciting news, analysis, and theories. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want even more Outer Rim Cantina content, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Twitter at Outer Rim Can and Instagram at Outer Rim Cantina. If you liked what you heard and want to support us even more, consider tipping us. 100% of tips go directly into creating more weekly content like this. You can also subscribe to our Patreon, where we have exclusive videos not seen on YouTube, extended podcast episodes, subscriber Q&As, and we even take topic requests for future YouTube videos or podcast episodes. That's all the time we have for this week. As always, may the Force be with you.